All right, SNL Live, free agency. Teams can officially sign players. I wonder who is going to go where. I kid. It is SNL, Andrew Locker, Cody Stoots with you. The Texans, they made moves. They might have actually stolen the top headlines the first 2 days, but not by signing guys. They did so by trade. Is there any deal that you feel the Texans should have made? Do you feel like they missed the boat in any area with what we saw the 2 days into free agency?
I would have liked to have seen a veteran wide receiver who can play outside. Obviously, Christian Kirk's addition via trade solidifies the slot spot for this team. And I understand that they added Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios, but I wanted somebody with a little bit more receiving prowess, a little bit less, depth, special teams usefulness to them. And the two names that I would have been interested in, and again, I don't think these players are like game-changing players, but could have been productive and useful guys, are Demarcus Robinson and Nick Westbrook-Akine, and they both signed for less than $5 million. Demarcus Robinson with the 49ers, Nick Westbrook-Akine with the Miami Dolphins. I still am looking for that outside wide receiver with that has something to his game. Maybe it's a speed element that would have been Nick Westbrook-Akine, or a savvy route runner in the red zone. That would have been Demarcus Robinson. Those are two deals. And I mean, I don't know why special teams get so much focus in free agency from the Texans. I could have done with one less special teams expert and one more wide receiver. But that's kind of those are the two deals that stick out to me, especially on offense, where they still need some wide receiver help. And obviously they still need some offensive line help, but I'm not sitting here lamenting some of these offensive line contracts that have been signed. I didn't want them to pay $80 million for Aaron Banks or Will Fries.
Yeah, I think the wide receivers, I think that could be an option a little bit later on. We've seen some wide receivers after the draft. You kind of weigh it out. You see how it is. I think there's an opportunity there. So I don't think they missed too many opportunities there. It is fascinating how much they invest in the D-line. Like these 1 year, $5 million deal. Like they just hand them out on the D-line. They gave out two of those, Barnett and Taylor, who I think is going to be really, really good. I'm interested to see how they handle Autry. I think at the very least, they showed us that the draft is going to be about offense. And whether that's offensive line, whether that's offensive skill guys, the draft is going to be about offense. And as far as what they did, not a big problem with it. I think they did the most important thing. They improved one of their biggest weaknesses, which is wide receiver. The offensive line, I don't think the offensive line got worse. I think the offensive line was ass with Laramie Tunsil. I think it's probably ass right now. And then we see what they do accordingly. Like it's not I've seen like there's like some sort of drop off. I don't know that there's much of a drop off. I think that the guys can kind of rally together and figure out what they want to do. Is this the offensive line you want to trot out there right now? No, but yeah, obviously not. But I don't think you wanted to trot out Shaq Mason, Kenyon Green, and Laramie Tunsil either. So on the outside, like the chatter is, well, the Texans released they got rid of 3 starters on their offensive line. They really only got rid of 1. And 2 of them we didn't anticipate being a part of plans next year. So it's easy to panic if you get like the outside influences kind of telling you what you're supposed to think. If you were already worried about the offensive line, then you remain worried about the offensive line. But I don't think there's any like more increased panic with this offensive line now as compared to what it was a few days ago.
It has been fascinating to watch national people who probably didn't pay very close attention to the Houston Texans offensive line situation and basically have the straw man argument that nobody believes the Texans are actually better without Laramie Tunsil, right? And it's like no one's saying the team is better because they got rid of Laramie Tunsil. They just had to go down a path where they have to explore getting better without Laramie Tunsil.
I think they are. I think they are, but I think it is addition by subtraction. They still need to fill the void. Like you don't want Austin Deculus or Titus Howard holding it down there, but I do think it's addition by subtraction with Laramie Tunsil. I really do.
How much better do people think the Texans offensive line needs to get? Like they don't need to be the Eagles next year. They don't need to be the Detroit Lions next year. They were a bottom 4, bottom 5 offensive line. If they're the 20th offensive line in the league, the 18th offensive line in the league. That's a huge leap for them. And if this past season they were the 20th best offensive line, they might have played another week. They might have won a couple of more games. Like the improvement doesn't need to be some sort of massive jump in just one offseason for this offensive line. They've got to get a little bit better, and that should go a long way for this team and for this offense.
Yeah, we'll see how they're coached. We'll see how that. I threw this theory out yesterday about the article. I think the article, I don't know. I'm not sitting here saying that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, but the DJ Bieneme article in ESPN on ESPN, I do imagine that when Caserio and D'Amico saw that, they were probably pretty pissed off.
The article where
the
majority of the quotes were absolutely crapping on Bobby Slowick.
Yes, and it kind of felt. I mean, you can kind of it seemed, and I judge it a lot by, and I like DJ Bieneme, and I think it's fine journalism to use anonymous sources. I think that's the way to go. Some people are against it. I think it's fine. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it wasn't said or anything like that. So this isn't a critique of the reporting. It's more so a critique of the quotes, because it sounded a lot like the Minnesota Vikings game. Honestly, it sounded like a summary of the season after the Minnesota Vikings game. And the two quotes that we got Minnesota were Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard. It sounded a lot kind of like them, just like guessing, like bullseye, all that. And the final sentence was basically like, well, the offensive line gets better with better coaching, which kind of felt like pat on the back to anonymous quotes, just from journalism background and reading. But the reason why I think it could have been, and I think it's good because it's symbolic of the overall mentality. But the reason why I think that it probably pissed off Caserio and D'Amico Ryans, and I'd bet the house under my roof, I'd bet the car in the garage below me, I would bet anything that they were pissed off, is because all season long, when D'Amico, Caserio, even Slowick were asked about these offensive linemen that were clearly sucking, and it wasn't just about coaching.
Protected them.
They protected the hell out of them.
Yep.
Like they took bullets for them to where they almost looked silly doing so. Like, and I think that's kind of like the team culture that I think is kind of appropriate now, or at least what they like and what they want to do. So when the coaches do that, and then the guy's already gone, like he's not staying here, like he's gone, and they both
that wasn't week 17 before the playoff run.
No, yeah, it was after the fact, and you're kind of shitting on the guy afterwards. Like, what exactly what do you think D'Amico and Caserio think about that? Like, there's no way they love that.
No, that was. And it felt pretty clear where it was coming from based on the conversation. And they have, like you said, stood up for these offensive linemen. The offensive linemen get the opportunity maybe. I mean, I just think about D'Amico Ryans saying our defense didn't do enough after the Lions game when the offense stunk. And it's like our defense didn't close the game out. It's like your offense scored 0 points in the second half, coach. You don't have to take that arrow. You don't have to take that you don't have to be that shield for that offense. Like, the defense doesn't have to take that for the offense. And the offensive line, and we had the conversation as well. When do they catch the blame? Like, because the way the conversation had been framed until they could make moves with this offensive line was it was Bobby Slowick's fault. It was Chris Strausser's fault. Well, now with players losing their jobs on the Texans, or the Texans moving on from some of those players, now we can kind of see there's blame also being placed on the offensive line. But none of it's been public, Nick Caserio or somebody in the front office anonymously saying, yeah, the offensive line sucked. Like, we saw it with our eyes. They've never piled on. Whereas, to your point, the offensive line piled on to a fired Bobby Slowick, who, not easy decision for D'Amico Ryans, right decision. D'Amico Ryans' his friend. So I can't imagine when D'Amico Ryans finds out that at least 3-4 of his players have gone on and crapped on the guy that he hired, who was his buddy, who's already gone. When he stood up for him all year long, Bobby Slowick stood up for him all year long, even Nick Caserio stood up for him, that couldn't have sat well with him.
Yeah, they did not like that. I would be willing to bet anything. The free agency overshadowed by TNT, aka the Trader Nick takeover. He completely he's shown that he likes to make moves, and I think the one thing that is apparent now is the defense being great is a non-negotiable at this point. Like it has to be top 5 caliber defense. You've invested in it. The talent is there. The expectations are such to where you should probably expect it. So it was already going to be a really good defense. I think they improved their biggest need, arguably at wide receiver. And even if it was by a little margin, but Christian Kirk, you at least have someone who can at least resemble a number 2 receiver. And then you have a little bit more depth with the Mechie and the Hutchinson. And I know why you're upset. We got some news. It's apparent that the old Oilers are signing, are drafting Cam Ward. That's very apparent. But there's also that they also improved their biggest strength, which was their defense. And they got one of the best D lines in the league, and they got one of the best secondaries in the league. Go ahead and we got some breaking news here. Cody Stoots is upset.
Yeah, Kevin Zeitler to the Tennessee Titans on a 1-year, $9 million deal.
Yeah, so you add that with what they've spent on the O-line, it's kind of apparent they're getting out in front of having the QB on the rookie deal, and Cam Ward is going to be a Tennessee Titan, so it appears.
So Zeitler was, to me, the top guard left out there. There's still a couple of worthwhile names, with Brandon Sheriff being the most worthwhile of those names. But you're looking at mostly bargain shopping and free agency from this point on, or hoping for a bounce back from an underperforming player in free agency after Zeitler goes off the board. And what does Tennessee care about if he retires at the end of next year? They've invested so much in that offensive line. 2 first-round picks. One's going to play left guard. One's going to play right tackle. They overpaid that guy whose name I'm going to mess up. It was Dan Moore. Was that his name? The Steelers left tackle. Overpaid him. Going to plop him down there at left tackle. They paid Liam Eichenberg last offseason at center. Maybe it's Lloyd Cushenberry, whichever one it is. And then Kevin Zeitler's now their right guard. So it's a good signing by them. He was the top guard on the market. And he got a $3 million raise off of what he made last year with the Lions. So Texans.
I thought there was a chance he was going to stop playing, but
we may see it at NRG Stadium this year. We may see the Kevin Zeitler retirement tour at NRG Stadium this year when the Titans come to town, or he may just be a 35-plus-year-old steady guy for a year for them, and they go out there and find a succession plan behind him. But yeah, that's a bummer. Kind of wanted him on the Texans.
Yeah, it's pretty apparent though that he's. I mean, they're drafting Ward though, right? I mean, that's the
Cam Ward seems like he's going to be in this division. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the route they're going to go. Can't really blame them. It's worth a shot. Not too costly if you. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's not like drafting Jamarcus Russell back in the day when there was no scale. So,
well, I mean, if I had to pick a quarterback this year, I'd pick him. That's who. If I had to pick a QB, I'd pick Cam Ward. So, I mean, they're not going to be good in 2025. If he's really good, then maybe in the future they're going to be better. But hey, good luck trying to be good against the Texans defense this year, Cam Ward. I don't care who your offensive linemen are. This really should be a nasty Texans defense. Not only did they solidify some of the weaker spots, Landry, kind of what you talked about, but they've added significant depth at different spots too. I mean, there's really only, as you kind of graze through the depth chart, the only glaring depth thing that I can sit there and say, yes, not super comfortable with that would be cornerback 3. And they still have opportunity and time to add to the cornerback room with a mid-level signing, or maybe they invest a draft pick late and feel like that guy's going to take over cornerback 3. But from the 11 guys they put on the field, the next 6 guys that D'Amico Ryans likes to put in there at defensive line, some of the mixing and matching they can do with the safety setup and Petrie on the field, Petrie off the field, they have to be excellent at defense. The offense is going to be, it's not going to be, hey, whatever you get out of the offense is a bonus. That needs to be much better, but they have to be excellent on defense to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's, I would bet on them being good at defense. It's just a matter of how much is the offense going to have to do.
Was it like I'm not way off base here when I say the path to being one of the best defenses in football was a much shorter path to travel than to being an solidly average offense, because they were just okay last year. They're probably a bottom 12 offense. Like, the path to be a potentially elite defense was a much shorter path to travel to and to get to for the Texans than to try to fix a lot of their issues on offense in one offseason.
Well, it's just kind of weird because we're comparing personnel issues and coaching issues, and we're kind of it's hard to really assess what this new scheme is going to look like. Like maybe we get a situation where these guys are coached up, the game plan's perfect, it's ideal, it's crisp, and it kind of complements. But I mean, with the way they were going with Slowick and Tunsil, yeah, I don't know that there was. I don't even know if you were personnel dependent at this point, because we never really saw the offense vibe even when they had personnel with Slowick last year at the start of the season. So it was almost a lost cause regardless of what you did. And the good thing about the defense is D'Amico's going to coach up whatever he gets. So the better that you give him, the more he has to coach up. It's going to be interesting to see how this offense looks after the draft, what they do. The skill guys are still a little bit troubling. They're better than they were, but the skill guys are troubling. And then you have this offensive line. I don't know what their vision is, what they're trying to do. There might not have been much opportunity in free agency. I just don't know how much more opportunity there's going to be in the draft and what it's going to look like. Like, we don't even know if they want Titus back at tackle. Like, we don't even know that.
Well, I would assume the people that Aaron Wilson has connections with in the offensive line room, I assume they didn't all get cleaned out. I would think that he still has a little juice with them. He has the report that, hey, Titus is, but again, we talked about this on the show yesterday. If Titus Howard doesn't play well, you're looking for a new tackle, like either in season or next off season. So he may only be an option, not a solution. Like, they have one solution, is Blake Fisher at one tackle spot. Like, that's the one solution they have on the offensive line. Everybody else is just an option. They have an option and they need to go and give themselves some more options and hope that Nick Caley's one hell of an offensive mastermind, and hope that Cole Popovich is one hell of an offensive line coach, because he's going to have to coach some guys up, make guys who weren't good last year better, and whatever they get in, have them ready to go whenever they're called upon if they're a rookie. So they're betting a lot on that staff when it comes to offense, whereas they got a bunch of solutions over on defense. They got options on offense, they got solutions on defense.
So here's my question though. If, like, let's say that Titus Howard and Blake Fisher are going to be your tackles.
Okay.
Let's say that that's what their plan is right now. Which do you think would benefit them from being in the best position heading into the season? Titus Howard just being at right tackle the whole time and holding it down, or Titus going inside and Blake Fisher getting that experience on the right side? Like, which would benefit? Like, do they benefit from the fact that Blake Fisher got the experience last year more so than if Titus would have just played tackle the whole time?
Yes, they are. I mean, Fisher's experience is beneficial, and they must have seen enough from the projection of what they thought the player is, in addition to what he performed, how he performed on the field, to give him one of those tackle spots, left or right tackle. I'm not interested in Titus being inside anymore. I would like for him to be a tackle solution, or a tackle option, I guess is the better way to phrase it. I'd like for him to be a tackle option, left or right. It doesn't matter to me, but I don't want him inside anymore, because then you have to go find a tackle. You're less likely to find a tackle that's worth a crap than a guard.
The question is he worth a crap though?
Well, he's on the roster. So do I see him being more useful to the team at guard, or do I see him being more useful to the team at the other tackle spot? I would tell you the chances are he's more useful at the other tackle spot that Blake Fisher doesn't play than being a guard.
It would be,
because again, the approach here on this offensive line is definitely the sum of the part. Like the whole of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. Like them playing together has to be better than what we individually think of the 5 players.
do you think center is set? Do you think Juice is the center?
No, it's between him and Jared Patterson.
Do you think there's a possibility Juice is right guard and Jared Patterson center?
That'd be kind of ugly, but yes, there is a possibility that exists. Juice clearly better as a center. Scruggs.
That's what Caserio says.
That's what Nick Caserio said.
I don't know that I believe it. So how do you feel about this squad when we look at the other stuff going on around the league? Most impactful, obviously, Daniel Jones is going to be the starter in Indy. I mean, they've pretty much telegraphed that. Jacksonville, they're kind of loading up. It'll be interesting to see what they do at 5. Titans are going to have Cam Ward, and they're all in on this offensive line. And then you have the Texans. How do you feel about this squad in the division?
Oh, I still very much feel like they're the favorite for the AFC South, and they would have to be in their own way to not win this division. And I felt that way pretty similarly going into last season as well, is the Texans would have to get in the Texans' way to not win the division. I still feel the same way. They haven't moved in the grander scheme of the AFC much for me. But as far as the AFC South, I do believe Jacksonville's going to be a little bit better. Tennessee fixes their offensive line situation. I don't like their coach. They probably are going to play a rookie quarterback. So they're not going to be much better than they were.
The worst thing. I mean, the rookie quarterbacks have had a little bit of success the last couple of years if he's a good one.
You're absolutely right about that. And Tennessee and Indianapolis' quarterback situation doesn't scare me at all. At all. I don't care which one of those players plays quarterback for them. That's not a scary situation because I don't believe Anthony Richardson's going to.
They're not that far off though. Like it's easy to like kind of scoff at their quarterback situation. They've won 4 less games than the Texans in the last 2 years. Like they're not that far off. Like if Daniel Jones is what he was 3 years ago or whatever when the Giants went to the playoffs, like it's not like Indianapolis is just that far off from being a 9-10 win team, which will have you competing near the division, top of the division, this division.
No, they're not. And obviously all those teams are in theory going to play an easier schedule than the Houston Texans are because the Texans were the first place team last year. But I don't like the Colts defense. I know they spent, $80 million trying to fix their secondary with a couple of free agent signings, but their front seven's not as impressive as we thought it was going to be. Their offensive line's in a little bit of turnover. They're going to have a brand new center, a brand new right guard, and they had to get their right tackle to take a pay cut to keep him around, to agree to a lower salary so he could stay on the team because they were going to cut him at his higher salary because he stunk. And then their quarterback situation's weird. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, he's really good, and I like a lot of their skill guys. They can't get him the ball.
Yeah, I don't. Their quarterback situation is Daniel Jones is a starter. Like we just gotta say that now. Daniel Jones is the starter. Like this competition is fake. Daniel Jones is their starting quarterback. You know it. I know it. Everyone should know it. Well, so it's Daniel Jones, which is not weird. I'm kind of getting semantic, but that's their situation. Is that Daniel Jones is their starting quarterback?
They don't worry me at all. I'm more worried about the Jaguars than I am the Colts.
Yeah, the Jags are interesting because they've been kind of an easy target this offseason, but I'm interested to see what they do at 5.
I mean, they're gonna have the opportunity. They've added some solid players in free agency to shore up some of their weaker spots, which is on the offensive line. They're gonna have the opportunity to add a big time player at 5 who should drastically affect their overall talent, regardless of which side of the ball he plays on. And I believe that their coach is a really good coach. I don't have the exact same, offensive mastermind. I can really see him figuring things out like I did when the Colts hired Steichen. But Cohen doesn't feel like he's going to be a bad coach. It's up to Trevor Lawrence to not miss some throws. It's up to that defense to continue to get a little bit better. But they're going to be a better football team than they were the past couple of years.
Yeah, you look at the last few first-year coaches in the AFC South. Doug Peterson, they made the playoffs his first year, if I'm not mistaken. They made the playoffs his first year. They won the division. D'Amico won the division, and he beat Steichen by a drop pass, who was another first-year guy.
Mm-hmm.
Callahan's ass, don't know what that was about.
And they still have him.
Yeah, and then you have Cohen. So, two of the last three division winners have been first-year guys, and one was playing win or go home against the other. So, the first-year head coach doesn't really matter. It's kind of like rookie quarterback. Like, oh, they have a rookie quarterback. Yeah, well, there's been a decent amount of success. I think 3 rookie quarterbacks have led their team to the playoffs the last 2 years.
Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, Cohen, it feels to me like is a pretty darn good coach. And that roster, it felt like it was a disappointing roster from a performance standpoint. He's got to get the most out of it. But the Texans, to me, I'm not going to just sit here and be like, oh, they're going to win the division easy going away, because the Texans' failures against the AFC South teams are not what keeps the AFC South close. The Texans' failures against other teams is what keeps the AFC South close.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. Patrick with the list. I like this. This is good stuff. Texans' biggest divisional challenges this year: number 1, their own O-line; number 2, the Jags; number 3, blank; 10 Titans; 11 Colts. So he's got the Colts back there. He's sleeping on the Colts. I can get that. I can understand that. I am intrigued though to see what they do. The Jags scare me. I think they benefited so well from plummeting, and not just being in that 8-9 win area to where they have a top 5 pick. They get your guy McMillan. They could get Tyler Warren. They could have their pick of the best running back in the second round. Like there's a lot of options for the Jags. So
they can help solidify their defensive line with some of the selections.
Right. I think the division's a lot better. The O-line though, I don't feel awesome about, but I could feel a lot worse.
We're not going to feel good about this offensive line until they've put together a month worth of good games. So like you're not going to feel comfortable probably ever in 2025 with this offensive line. You're not going to feel like it's a situation they could deal with until they go out there and show it. Like there are not players they can add to the equation that you're going to be like, they nailed it. Look at that. This offensive line, they're ready to block for CJ. They're ready to protect. Like that's nothing they can do throughout the rest of the offseason, in training camp, can make you feel that way. So they have to give themselves the best opportunity to with options on the roster, and they truly have to have that best player plays coming out of training camp, like they've sometimes said and not always exactly done. Left guard with Kenyon Green is probably the best example of that last year. So we're not going to feel good about this offensive line until week 8 probably. And we may not feel good about it then. We may just feel like, yep, they can get it done with this offensive line.
Yes. And I think they may do 2 years ago. That's the most confusing part about this whole thing. And I know it's a different scheme and stuff, but they may do 2 years ago with much less talent. So do with that what you want, but they may do.
I keep thinking back to, and I know you hate the one score game conversation. That's not really exactly what I'm saying, but if their offensive line was a little bit better, they beat the Green Bay Packers, the Jets, and probably the Lions last year. And they're in a different setting in the AFC. They're in a different standing, and maybe they're playing a little bit longer, 1 week longer. They don't have some giant road to go down to be good enough to run offense this upcoming season. They really don't. They won 10 games. They won the division. They won a playoff game. They played the Chiefs close with a bad offensive line. If it gets less bad, they should still be a pretty darn good football team.
But I would push back there because I don't think they have like a massive cushion in the rest of the division that we acknowledge. I think we spend our time looking up, and we look up at the Kansas Cities, the Baltimores, and all the good teams, but we don't necessarily look down and realize that those teams were disasters last year, and those teams can also get better and make stuff a lot more difficult. Like I think that's the problem, because I look at it as you're playing two levels. Like, so this is the Texans level. You're trying to get up to this level, and this level's trying to get up to you. And I think when you win 2 division titles, you tend to just say, well, we're this close to Kansas City. We're this close to Baltimore. We beat the Chargers in the playoffs. And you say, well, if we get this much better, well, the Chargers can get better. The Chiefs can get better. The Ravens can get better. And the teams that are pushing up to you can get better as well. So I don't subscribe to your theory that the offensive line can get this much worse and they're still a good team. They could be a good team. Hell, they could be a better team and miss the playoffs. Like that's the crazy thing that people don't want to acknowledge. Like, there have been times where teams have won 10 games and not even made the playoffs. Like it can happen. So I disagree with you, because it almost feels like when you have that mindset, you're pausing everybody else's improvement and you're just focusing on the Texans when you say that.
Yeah, I'm just not as worried about the division as you are. Like,
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm worried. I'm just saying I just think it's better.
I'm not giving – I have no respect for Daniel Jones. He's one of the worst quarterbacks I've watched play starting football for a long time. He should have not gotten anywhere close to the amount of chances he got. It's a joke. And I'm not – he does – I like Shane Steichen. He's cobbled it together to win, what, 9 football games and 8 football games with an inferior quarterback setup. Well, guess what? He's still got an inferior quarterback setup. And I don't know that the rest of his team is that much better. Like, the Jaguars are still the same team that they were a year ago with a couple of better players and maybe a better coach. They're still a team of ifs. If this player, if this player, if this player. And they didn't get any ifs turn into, yeah, that guy did what he's supposed to do last year. That didn't happen for him. And the Titans are one of the worst teams in football. So, yes, a 4-2 Texans in the division versus a 5-1 Texans in the division, that does allow that number 2 team to creep closer to you in the AFC South. But I don't believe that they're going to be worse than 4-2 in the division. And I do feel like they should be a better football team in a lot of different areas, to the point where they have some of these close games turn their way instead of going in the loss column. And you're not worried about the division nipping at your heels.
Yeah, I get it. I just don't. I'm not dismissing it, and I don't like. Do you respect Gardner Minshew?
I respect him a whole hell of a lot more than Daniel Jones.
Okay,
they should have brought him back instead of giving Daniel Jones the opportunity.
Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones at that. I would say is a good bargain. I would say is a good bargain at that. With the 1 year with where they're at, I think you could do a lot worse. You could be in a lot worse quarterback help. But I agree with you, man. I agree with you on that. I don't think the division's like going to turn into one of the best. I think these teams are going to get a lot better. But I also think that CJ is going to get a lot better. And I think the offensive scheme is going to get a lot better. And I think they have one of the best defenses in the league. So there's that. I think the defense is just, oh my God. Like, when you say scratching on the surface, a lot of time it's like, okay, but it's kind of a long shot. Like, I will be more surprised if this defense is ranked outside of the top 5. I'll be more surprised than if they're than anything. Like, I think the floor for this defense is top 5 defense in the league. And we don't try to predict injuries or anything like that. But I think that is like the saving grace. I think that there's a chance next year where people are singing the praises of this defense, like at almost like an extreme level.
I'm right there with you. I am bought in on the defense. I am not predicting a heartbreak or having any sort of pessimism with them. If healthy, excellent unit, one of the best in football. And let's see where the offense lands. They love that. They love the change in coaching staff that they made. That's going to hopefully improve the players that were already on the team and can make the players that we feel like are middling additions, maybe just a little bit better than middling additions.
Well, the other thing that I like about it is, there's always, there seems to be like the notion that the only way that you help your quarterback is offensive line and receivers. Hell, a good defense can help. Like it can help you a lot. It keeps you within arm's length. We also I don't want to say we've forgotten about it, because I don't think we can assume one way or the other. I guess we can assume that it's going to be better, but we don't know what they're going to be coached like on offense. Like, if you tell me that this offense is going to be coached like the defense too, then okay, well, they're going to know how, they're going to be able to bounce things. Because the one thing that I always find interesting, and Nick Caley said this, and D'Amico kind of says this, and Bill O'Brien said this, but it's like, week to week game plan, no square peg, round hole, week to week. When Bill O'Brien would say week to week, it was like, I don't really think you know what you're doing. It almost feels like you're just kind of changing stuff just to change it. And it's not based on actually feeling out your players and the opponents. But D'Amico, when he says it, I feel like his game plans kind of resemble, like, there really hasn't been too many instances where D'Amico's put together a game plan and I've said, well, what was that? Like it hasn't happened. Even like from like it hasn't been like there's times when people say, well, the corner's playing too far. I haven't felt that way. Like I've seen guys get their ass kicked. Like against the Chiefs, how is Travis Kelce wide open? He's wide open because Azeez Al-Shire's where he's supposed to be and he's not doing what he's supposed to do. Like, it wasn't like that he was just it was but we don't see a ton. We see a few busted coverages, but that's as much player driven as anything. But I do wonder, like, is Nick Caley going to be able to do this? Is he going to be able to adjust? Like, how are they going to look game plan? And I think we kind of throw that to the side because now it's all about the Joes. It's all about the Jimmies and Joes when we start talking about free agency. And then once camp happens and once we start seeing games, we incorporate the Jimmies and Joes with the X's and O's. But right now it's just, we don't know about this offense. Like, Nick Caley's never called an offense, so we don't know what it's going to look like.
We don't know if he's going to have more Patriot history, like when he coached for the Patriots, or if he's going to have more Rams stuff, or we don't even know who the other wide receivers are on this team yet. You're talking about accentuate the strengths of the players. Here's what I know about Christian Kirk. He can get open from the slot. Here's what I know about Nico Collins. He can do damn near anything you want a wide receiver to do. You can accentuate those strengths. You can find a way to get Joe Mixon the football in the backfield, run the football well. Like, they're going to add to that. You're going to get more wide receivers, probably draft picks, maybe some free agent additions, and then you got to see. You get a speedster on the outside. Hey, let's set up a play where we feel like this guy's going to get behind the defense. Give CJ an opportunity just to unleash a bomb because that guy can take the top off of defenses. Like, they're not done building this thing yet. That's the roughest part of like day 3 of free agency here is they still got moves to make. The Texans have made moves that ended up being super significant well after the start of free agency in Nick Caserio's time. And obviously, the Stefon Diggs trade was a super significant improvement of the offense last year. It didn't end up working as well as they wanted it to.
Improvement.
Well, they went from 2 wide receivers that you trust to 3 wide receivers that you trust. We were talking about one of the best 1-2-3s in football.
But that trade looks really rough now. Does it not?
They paid for a rental that I'm sure, intended to extend, and then the situation became a situation that they did not want to extend the player. So,
like, on hindsight, it looks rough.
A future second-round pick for a wide receiver that only ended up playing 7 games for you, 8 games.
I look at it as trading back 19 spots, which probably cost a second anyways, right?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, yes, that trade looks bad, man.
I wouldn't want them to use a second-round pick on a rental player every offseason, but that was very much a 2024 move. That move was not about 2025 and beyond in any way. That was about that season. They felt like they had an opportunity in that season, and they were going to improve on what they did the first year. Stefon Diggs was only about the 2024 season. And that was not with that did not have any thought to 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, that was their all in. That was all the chips on the table, and it busted.
Right. And yeah. And they had a good hand. It turns out everybody else had a better hand.
Yeah, busted badly. Very badly. But who knows?
But again, I wouldn't want them to. I liked the risk of the move. I was okay with the risk of the move at the time. I wouldn't want them to do that every offseason. Not when Nick Caserio's had as much success post round one as he has.
So if we look at what we've seen from Nick Caserio, he's kind of going back to his Patriot ways. He's got those honky receivers. Maybe we start to see an array of running backs too. Maybe we start to see them taking backs. Maybe the tight end. Don't know. But this is not the wide receiver group they're rolling with. I can promise you that.
No.
There is going to be a secondary market veteran, and there is still going to be a rookie in this wide receiver room. I can promise you. And there's going to be a running back. They are going to go ham on skill position guys for the remainder of it. The defense is set. Like, unless D'Amico sees like some sort of linebacker and maybe like some corner depth or something like that, the defense that they have set their defense. And now this is a Nick Caley draft. 100% Nick Caley draft. Now, I do wonder, do they trust him more than Bobby Slowick? How much say did Bobby have in like the offense? I would bet that Nick Caley has more say in what goes and what has gone on with the offense than what Bobby Slowick did. But make no mistake about it. This is 100,000%. This is going to be a Nick Caley type of draft.
I agree.
And you look at what they did. I did this yesterday on the stream. You just look at the offense versus the defense. And this just kind of gives the visual of what Caserio has done. You can look at the top. On the offense, there's only 5 guys that they've used. There were only 5 offensive moves. So you had Laken Tomlinson. They brought back Dare, Christian Kirk, Berrios, and Watson. So they addressed their receiving room. Not great, but it's better than it was. They didn't do much at running back. I would say they actually upgraded with Kenyon Green. That's the other thing about it. Like that, Laken Tomlinson, say what you want about it. He's better than Kenyon Green. Like, is that
correct?
Yeah. So they upgraded that.
He's also better than Kendrick Green.
Yes.
I would also, I'm not out of pocket saying, I believe Laken Tomlinson is better than Juice Scruggs at guard as well.
Okay. So not like significantly, nothing to write home about, but they've upgraded guard. D-line's just insane. I mean, they're just bringing in. They bring back 2 guys, and then they bring in someone else on the interior, and they got Darrell Taylor, who I think is going to be the badass that everyone falls in love with in camp. I think he's going to be a beast, and I've started calling him Darrell. I guess they need 2 special teams. Do they think Nick Neiman can play linebacker or something like that? Like I'm starting to wonder, like they have to like him more than just a special teams guy, right?
I would guess so.
Okay. So they replaced Neville Hewitt, right?
Yes. I would think that Neiman is basically a 1-for-1 replacement for Neville Hewitt.
Okay. So Mbop Hansen is back.
That's another special teams guy. Remember him flying down the first kickoff or first or second kickoff? He got a concussion in the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he started approaching things a little bit different after that. Tremont Smith. And oh, by the way, they're also the punt return thing and the return game. And then they brought back MJ Stewart and Gardner Johnson. They got the safety. So that kind of chalks off the safety. So when you actually look at it in front of you, they improved at guard. Might be like not much. They improved their wide receiver room, and they made one of their strengths even more of a strength at defense. So that's where they're at right now.
And there's still lots of work to do. Still lots of work to do. And a lot of it's, I mean, we sit here, your point, I was thinking about this as you were saying this a moment ago. They're going to have to just get players who maybe haven't been good elsewhere or haven't had the potential unlocked or haven't been coached well enough. And they're going to have to trust their coaching staff. I mean, we talk about, every time we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, yes, we talk about how great of an offensive mind Andy Reid is, but we also make a point to point out that they have one of the better defensive minds in Steve Spagnuolo. The Eagles had Vic Fangio and the offensive staff that they had. And those are just the two. I mean, you've got to have really good coaches to also be successful. They changed over the offensive coaching staff. We know the defensive coaching staff's good with what they were able to put together. They gave them some more tools, and they're betting on these guys being better coaches on offense.
Well, I think that's one of the best. That's one of the best ways to put it, because they had one of the worst defenses in the league. It might have been the worst defense in the league 2 seasons ago, and now all of a sudden they bring in Fangio, and they signed a couple guys, but for the most part, like the core of that defense was the same, and it was one of the better defenses in the NFL, and they completely bitch slapped the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So as much as we talk about what they need to do on the offensive line, what they need to figure out, what they need, like if you bring in a coach that has an impact, I'm not going to sit here and say Kaylee and Fangio or anything like that, but if you do that, it is going to help you. So
they already have the impact defensive minds. That's D'Amico. They just need an impact offensive mind. They were not like, I know we talk about the disappointment in offense in 2024. They were not one of the worst offenses in football. They were one of the worst offensive lines in football, but they weren't one of the worst offenses in football. It was more about, we know there's more. And then, they went out there and made some changes to go get that more from the players that they do have. We know there's more to CJ Stroud's game than 2024. Nick Caley's here to unlock that. We know there's more to Joe Mixon than what we saw last year. They had long stretches of the game where they couldn't run the ball. They couldn't get things going. Like, Nick Caley's here to make sure that doesn't happen. And coaching matters.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, like, if there were a press conference today, what would you ask D'Amico and Caserio? What would your question be to Nick Caserio and D'Amico based on everything that we've seen this week up to this point?
I need a second. I mean, I have Tunsil questions. Mostly, I have Tunsil questions.
Yeah,
mostly.
I think that's the way to go.
Like that'd be where I'd start. I want to ask something about the one voice conversation.
Well, my first question would be, do you see Titus Howard as a tackle? Do you now that Tunsil's gone, do you see Titus Howard more as a tackle? And I think Nick would probably give that answer, and to me, I don't think they would shy away from that. Do you see Titus more as a tackle? I think would be one question that you would need to ask. Yes. I would like to know that.
It's worth noting, when they talk about Laramie Tunsil getting traded, they're going to talk glowingly about him. They're not going to crap on the guy.
They're not going to throw players under the bus. But I don't think they really think glowingly of him, though.
I have like I'm trying to formulate exactly how but I want to know more about that one voice in the offensive line room. There's going to be one voice in the O-line room. Is that player-driven or coach-driven? You've mentioned the one voice in the offensive line room. Is that a player-driven voice or a coach-driven voice?
It's a good question.
That's probably, D'Amico's the one that's used that one voice line, so that he's probably the one that would need to be asked that.
Yeah, I would want to know. I would also want to know. So when you came up here last year and you kind of defended the offensive line play. Is it fair to say that in that moment you were aware that it was that much of a problem? Like, is this kind of an acknowledgement that maybe it was as bad as a lot of us were talking about it being? Because D'Amico, I mean, he wanted to make his, I mean, it's one thing to defend your players, but he wanted to make his smokes. I know people focus on the negative. Well, you kind of like vindicated them the last 2 weeks. Like, if you want to do what you want to do, that's fine. But I think it's funny when there's always like that little sneak that, yeah, if people focus on the negative, there wasn't much positive.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got rid of got rid of these guys. So what did he make of that? But yeah, is Titus a tackle? I think is important, and I think the one voice thing with you that you bring up is important. I mean, if you just ask him what did Laramie Tunsil do for your team, it's a waste. Like, nobody, like, he's not.
Why did you trade him? Well, we need to get better.
We need to do what's best for us. Like, it's kind of a waste. Swarm in the soup. HDAV Traveler says everyone talked about how bad the Chiefs OL was last year, and they did make the Super Bowl. Yeah, and they made do with what they had. They had Patrick Mahomes too. And a good defense. Very good defense, by the way. Defense was solid. Offer Brown's a third.
And 26th, fifth for Wyatt
Teller. Okay.
Cleveland doesn't seem inclined to move off of their offensive linemen on the inside.
Marcus Jay says he's sick of experimenting crap on the O-line. Get some guys who you can get the job done. I don't know that they've really experimented. I feel like they've invested quite heavily in it. It just hasn't gone right.
That's probably they thought they had those guys coming out of the 2023 draft, and they were wrong. They were wrong about it. The offensive line that Nick Caserio foresaw coming out of the 2023 draft, it was not a good offensive line. We watched it for most of this season. It was Laramie Tunsil left tackle, Kenyon Green at left guard, Juice Scruggs at center, Shaq Mason at right guard, and Titus Howard at right tackle. That wasn't a good enough offensive line. Marcus talking about the play. What players have they for sure? We know that guy's really good. Have they not been able to get in the short amount of time that they've had to move off of the way that they built the offensive line and now retooling it? If you want to tell me Joe Thuney, they should have traded for Joe Thuney from Kansas City, I'll listen. The 4th round pick, he'd have been the left guard. Boom. You put him right there. He's a solution for a year or two at left guard. Like, who are the other names? Like, I understand Will Fry's got $80 million and, the Texans should have just paid. He's played 5 good games in the NFL. Aaron Banks is not a good player. He was not a good player for the San Francisco 49ers who had offensive line issues. Aaron Banks is fine. It's the cost of doing business in free agency when you screw up. The Packers went out there and their quarterback doesn't make as much as some of these other quarterbacks because they kind of got ahead of they had a unique situation when they paid him. So
I think the offensive line being uncomfortable though is a good thing. Like, I think it might elevate the play a little bit. I think they've been too comfortable.
Like, they have flipped how they felt about the offensive line. They went from comfort to urgency.
Yeah, and they were comfortable and they sucked. And they were comfortable and they sucked. Like, the whole vibe was like comfort. Like, the most disgraceful thing that I've witnessed in my time covering sports, and I've been in multiple cities. Like, after that Minnesota game was one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen. From an overall performance. And I remember, I thought this was interesting. And I've told this story. I remember when you and I were in the locker room, and I don't know if this was after the Minnesota game. All these games become a blur where they suck. It wasn't after the Minnesota game. It was after a home game. Might have been Tennessee. But Patterson's like back in the corner, and I was like, hey, let's go talk to Patterson. Have you ever talked to him? You were like, nah. And he had just starting. And I was like, yeah, I don't know his vibe or anything, but we'll see what's up with him. And you remember I asked another media type. I asked him, I said, hey, what's Patterson like? What's Jared Patterson like? And you remember what he said?
Something to the effect of he'll answer your questions.
No. He said it with a straight face. He wasn't talking shit. He was just literally like, yeah. And then the rest of the rest of the media followed there. But he looked at me and he said, and it was A-Dub. It was A-Dub. It was Aaron. I said, hey, have you ever talked to J-Pat? Because I wasn't going to like practice every day after the until last year because I was on the air. And he goes, he's an adult. He's an adult. Like he just said that with like a straight face. He said, yeah, he's an adult. And it's interesting because why would like if you're making that clear, what is that saying about the other options? Like, what is that saying? Like, what is that saying? I know Aaron's cool with Tunsil, he's cool with Titus, but when he says like, and he's not even talking crap yet, he's an adult. What does that say? And I think that if that's the attitude now, because look, man, if I'm Jared Patterson and I'm Juice Scruggs and I'm built a certain way, even if I'm Shaq Mason and I come into that locker room and Laramie Tunsil's moving like Laramie Tunsil has the luxury of being able to move and still being effective, and Titus Howard is performing poorly, but he's like kind of like piggybacking off of Laramie, are you really going to speak up? Like, it's kind of hard, right? Like, you saw CJ say he's a vet, he's not doing anything in extra. Like, maybe there's like some sort of like contagious, like, whoa, what iron sharpening iron, like type of element with the offensive line now. But I just thought that was interesting that it was like, yeah, he's an adult.
Well, they need a leader in the offensive line room, and they need somebody, be it Cole Popovich leading them from the position of offensive line coach, or they have a guy in there that everybody rallies behind. And I think back to I talked to Jack Kaiser, the Notre Dame linebacker who's a draft prospect this year, talking about the Senior Bowl, because I was asking about Marcus Freeman, because I'd watched a Marcus Freeman clip about leadership, and he's like, we don't need leaders by example, we need vocal leaders. And I said, why does that work? He said, well, leadership works because you allow the guys you lead to hold you to the same standard. You think Jared Patterson ever told Laramie Tunsil to do something?
No.
You think Titus ever told Laramie to do anything?
No.
And then the inverse would be, do you think Laramie ever told them to do anything? No.
It's five individual guys on a group that has to be synchronized.
Yep.
And I think if you're defending Laramie Tunsil, like, then you don't believe in iron sharpening iron. Like, even the defenders aren't sitting there saying, oh, he made all his teammates better. No one's saying that. Like, even like the defense is not that. It's basically, oh, he handled his business. That's what it is. So either you buy into the romanticism of the D'Amico or you don't, but that's just kind of where it is. Sean Gregg asks, is that a cow?
That's a cow. Sean's got a cow in his picture. Is Sean a farmer?
Big head. A big head right there. Are we officially going to make LOS a thing or what?
Legion of Swarm.
Also, does picking up Cooper Kupp still make sense now that we have Kirk? If not, then what do y'all want to do? Let's just play imagination. What if the Texans picked up Cooper Kupp? What would you think? If you found out now that the Texans were picking up Cooper Kupp, how would that change the way you look at this squad right now?
I would tell you that Nick Caley's about to be putting some really creative stuff together. Look, Christian Kirk could play a little outside, but he's primarily a slot receiver. Kupp is a slot receiver. They're going to put some creative stuff together to utilize these wide receivers. Both those guys win and are successful out of the slot. So there's a heavy belief that Nick Caley can utilize them. I like Cooper Kupp. You basically could always make sure that you always have a really good slot receiver on the field.
We're 600 plus deep, by the way. Be sure to subscribe to SNL as well. I'm starting to be open to the Ibuka or Matthew Golden at 25 if it happens. Starting to be open to it.
They definitely need, and again, I don't want to put any player in a box, especially a wide receiver, with the how good everybody is at being able to move around. And they definitely need somebody that can consistently play opposite Nico Collins. But it's pretty clear they're going to be putting 3 wide receivers on the field quite a bit this year. Christian Kirk, a yet to be determined outside guy, and Nico Collins. So if there was a free agent, I would say Tyler Lockett would be my guy to be outside opposite Nico Collins. But I'm leaning a little bit more towards a draft pick being that guy opposite Nico Collins.
Jesse F says Legion of Saltines.
Race car.
We could, one of my favorite moments that's ever happened on SNL is when Nick Neiman, the special teams linebacker that they signed yesterday, got signed. And the chat was like, they got another honka. Because we said you can't use the hard EY on honky.
Yeah,
they got another honka. It's like, that's one of my favorite moments from the chat since we started doing SNL.
We'll get more into the Cooper Kupp and receivers tomorrow. We'll talk about that. There's a lot going on. This was kind of a little bit of a smooth out after the frenzy that has been the last 2 days. Shout out to everyone for coming through and everyone who has partaken in the last few days. Legion of Ritz. Good Lord. Be sure to subscribe. Be sure to like. Be sure to ride along and keep riding along. Ride, don't stop. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.